Greetings! I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to show you how I painted these zombies. It is Halloween after all, assuming that A, you're watching this video when it was uploaded, and B, that I did in fact manage to get it finished and uploaded in time for Halloween. If not, just pretend that it's Halloween. Yeah, that works. Halloween doesn't really mean much to me, but I was prompted by a patron, and it did seem like a fun and relevant time to do zombies, and I have been meaning to paint these for quite a while now. These particular zombos are from Project Z by Warlord Games, or would you say Project Z? I wouldn't. There's a couple of old build videos that I will link in the description below if you'd like to see how these models go together. I started by priming, and as usual, I haven't filmed anything to show the models in their primed form, and just started spraying base coats, which, in this case, is Ammo by MiG Warm Skin Tone, which you will probably notice isn't exactly a zombie flesh colour. I didn't have a specific zombie flesh paint, and I didn't really want to order one and wait for it to arrive, so I figured why not just make it up as I go along. Anyway, I'm spraying this onto any flesh areas. I then spray a fairly soft highlight with Vallejo Model Colour Stone Grey, which is obviously a more stony colour. I figured this would make a less than healthy looking skin tone. It is a fairly subtle effect, and kind of hard to see on the video here, but it is there, and it did do something. I followed that with a light airbrushing of model colour Pale Grey Blue, which I also figured would impart a sort of ill, deadish looking tone. It is, again, sort of hard to see here, but I felt like the effect was working. I did think about doing some variations in skin tone, maybe a few darker skinned zombos would have been good, but I didn't really give myself a lot of time to do this, and as a result, pretty much everybody gets the same skin tone. The pale grey blue went on a bit heavier on some zombies, but that's not really much of a variation. It looked okay to me though, and I figure the washes are going to do a lot of the work here anyway. The first wash I tried was Army Paint and Military Shader, which you can see I tested on the zombie's gown. This is diluted roughly 1 part military shader to 3 parts water, and I thought it looked pretty decent. It's a sort of greeny, dirty, vaguely rotting colour. I was going to try green tone, but this was pretty good, so it's what I went with. It's not the bright or toxic green that you see some people painting zombies with, but who's to say what a resurrected, formerly living human might look like? I did go fairly heavy in some areas, though I did try not to let it pool up too much anywhere. It did pool up pretty heavily on some of the clothing, but we can use that to our advantage. It looked like this when it was dry. It is a bit stony looking, but I liked it, and I'm kind of counting on washes and gore to make it look a bit more zombie-like later on. But before I can do that, it's time to paint the clothing. As you can see, I've started with the IV zombie, to which I've applied Vallejo Model Colour Sky Blue, because I figured a nice light blue colour made sense. This is quite a large piece of clothing, so I make appropriate brush size choices. Obviously I'm being careful to avoid getting the colour onto the skin, but we can hide mistakes with blood and gore, which is nice, but I don't want to use that as a crutch. The next colour I used was Vallejo Model Air Scarlet Red. This is pretty much the same thing really, just instead of a hospital gown, it's a nice long dress. You can see in some places that the fairly heavy spots of military shader are showing through the red. Ordinarily that would be a problem, and you'd have to apply more coats to deal with it, but if you want stained clothing, and I do, this is kind of a bonus. Straps and thin bits of clothing are a bit of a challenge here of course, but if you use appropriate brushes and go carefully, it shouldn't be too hard. Again, we can hide any errors with gore, yes. Or mud would work too. This lady with the bags gets several colours applied. Nothing really remarkable in painting the bags. I simply picked out a few colours as I went and applied them. The next colour I used was Model Colour Purple, which looks good on a hat or a shopping bag. Also on clothing, like this skirt. Sometimes the thin strappy bits are a bit treacherous, and sometimes you have to think about things like the underside of skirts. You could be fancy and do layers of progressively darker colours, or you can just do the base colour. These zombies are almost never going to be viewed from below, so I've just done the base colour. The next paint was Model Colour Ivory, which I figured made sense for white clothing, like this guy's shirt. You could just use white, but I like using ivory a bit better, because white is just too white, you know? It's going to get dirty anyway, and ivory looks a bit more like a used piece of clothing to begin with. In hindsight, I kind of wish I'd used this colour on a few more things. It's a pretty good base to make the gore stand out a bit more. Being that this colour is pretty much white, it can be a bit difficult to get a good opaque coat, so multiple coats is the way, though by the same token, everything is going to be filthy later, so perfect solid colours aren't really that important here. Model colour Mahogany Brown comes next, which I apply to this guy's pants. This colour kind of makes me think of 70s clothes, though this guy looks relatively well preserved, so maybe he's not from the 70s. Maybe I'm starting to waffle. I clearly thought this colour worked well for pants, but it also works pretty well on shoes. Some people wear brown shoes, right? Not all of these shoes stayed this colour, but that's okay. Changing your mind about colours is allowed. More brown, why not? This time, model colour Chocolate Brown, which I thought was another good pants colour. I really like this squished zombie. What a cool design. No idea what colour I'm going to do tyre tracks yet, but that's for future Herbert to worry about. This guy looked like he might be some sort of park ranger or something. Rangers might wear brown, and thus chocolate brown pants. I have no idea if this is in any way realistic, but they're my zombies, and let's be honest, I was tempted to paint most of them with pinks and purples, but I didn't. Anyway, this is another colour that I thought made sense for shoes. Also the briefcase, though maybe a lighter colour would have been good to show the inevitable gory evidence of its use as a weapon. Too late now, I guess. Next, I painted this dress with Vallejo game colour Squid Pink. I had to paint at least something pink. I was recently given a friend's collection of paints, a lot of which are very old, including this colour. It was kind of gunky and partially dried out, so it went on a bit weird. Still good, just a bit weird. But again, this is a zombie, and I don't think they really look after their clothes, so it works. If you've got some old, kind of gross paints, maybe painting zombies is the way. A dress like this needs matching shoes. I'd want matching shoes if I wore a dress like this, wouldn't you? Model colour Violet Red is a nice colour, and I apply it to these two ladies' tops. The first of which I wasn't totally sure about the sleeves. Maybe I built her wrong, but one sleeve is short and the other one is long. Perhaps one of them has been torn off. We'll fix that with blood and gore. Here's another nice colour, model colour Deep Green. Green probably goes with brown pants. I was a bit unsure about the chest region of this shirt. It looks like it's in bad condition, of course, but I couldn't quite tell if it's been ripped open or if it was just sort of wavy. I opted for ripped open, so it's almost a very deep V-neck, the inside of which will be occupied with torn up flesh. This shirt was a bit easier to figure out. And who doesn't like a green tie? Probably somebody, but when he was alive, this guy thought they were great. Obviously, this has to be done after the shirt has been base coated. Unless you like making things harder for yourself, then they need to be. Why not go ahead and paint the suit? I used model colour light grey here. I don't especially like light coloured suits, but I was thinking of this as a kind of canvas for blood splatters and such. Also, why not paint this guy's hat? I then used model colour brown violet on Ranger Man's shirt and hat. I wasn't totally sure about it, but I did apply it. I did, however, like it on this guy's pants. It's a good pants colour. Backwards Hat Man got his hoodie painted with model colour USA Olive Drab, and I do think this is a good colour for a hoodie, but it probably won't be as good for showing stains clearly. On the other hand, I don't think it would be very convincing if everybody was wearing light colours. I also used this colour on the legless lady's pants, because why not? After some pondering, I decided that I wasn't really happy with the Ranger's shirt and hat, so I repainted them with model colour US Field Drab. This is another figure where you probably need to take your time, mostly around the hat. It just wouldn't do to have the flesh be the same colour as the hat, would it? I used the same colour on this guy's shirt, and it looks different, and that's because on the Ranger figure, there's a darker colour underneath it. Oh, thanks, Captain Obvious! I quite like the way this guy's shirt has been shredded at the front. I did try to only paint the bits that are shirt, but it's not really worth spending too much time trying to get it perfect. The same colour goes on the squashed Zombo, and maybe this was also a Ranger at some point. He probably just lost his hat while being run over. I painted this skirt with model colour Luftwaffe uniform World War II. I felt like it went with the green quite nicely. Actually, I think it works well with a lot of things. I figured grey shoes would go with a grey suit, why not? And also this top. While I had this figure, I figured, why not find a different colour that looks decent with the grey, so I painted her pants with model colour Gunship Green. Obviously this is pants and not a gunship, but I thought it looked pretty decent. I used the same colour on this shirt, most of which is missing. It looks like this one is just torn, with no wounds underneath, so I tried to be extra careful along the torn edge. I figured this cop should probably have cop uniform colours, so I painted the pants and hat with Vallejo Model Air Blue, which isn't quite as dark as I wanted, but if I did have a darker blue, I couldn't find it. I also used this on a couple of pairs of shorts, intending it to look like denim. It's kind of dark though, so I guess these are fairly new denim. This guy who's torn somebody's head off also got the same colour, again with the intent of representing denim jeans. Next, I used model colour Ultramarine to paint the cop's shirt. The cops around here wear slightly lighter blue shirts, but I like this colour so I used it. I figured it would add some interest if I used this colour to paint the band around the hat too, because again, why not? How about some yellow? I used Model Air Medium Yellow on this top. I did accidentally paint over the low cut, but that's okay, Gore will fix it. Gore fixes everything. What an awful colour combination. I'd wear it. It turns out this guy is, or was, a nurse or doctor of some sort. I used model colour Green Sky. I did look at Warlord's painted example of these, and theirs is green too, so I guess it makes sense. The reason I was looking at the references though, is those shoes. They've got covers on them, which I guess makes sense, and that's why they looked kind of weird. Next, I used Model Air Dark Sea Grey because why not? It's not going to show stains very well, but I figured the forearm this guy has handcuffed to him will probably make up for that. It's a good colour for a shirt anyway. Next up, model colour Black. Certainly not a very good colour for showing stains, but this guy is wearing a leather jacket and it definitely looks like it would be black. I do kind of wish he had some biker patches moulded into his back or something, and I did think about hand painting some on, but I'm lazy and wanted to get these finished. Black is also a good colour for shoes, more common than brown anyway. This Zombo looked like she was wearing sneakers, and they do of course come in black, but I painted these with model colour Neutral Grey, same with this one. I didn't feel like black sneakers would go with this lovely outfit. And that's pretty much all of the base coats done. These clothes are all kind of plain though, so I decided to add a few details, some of which were conveniently moulded into the models, like the belts. I used Ammo by MiG red leather on a few of the belts, which is pretty simple to do. You just find figures that are wearing belts, and then paint along the belt, avoiding the bits that are not belt. Not all belts are brown though, so I painted a few of them with model colour black. I'm pretty sure I found all of them moulded in belts, and gave them one of these two colours. Pants usually have belt loops, so the belt works, and for that it's simply a matter of going back with the base colours and adding belt loops in with a fine brush. I'm not showing it because I forgot to video it, so I guess you'll just have to take my word for it that I did it. I don't quite know if I'm actually painting the belt on this guy with the torn up front, but it made me chuckle to think that it would be visible through the destroyed shirt and the gore, so I gave him a belt. Next, I got the model colour Ivory out again to paint in the straps on the back of Pink Dress Zombie. It's easier to get the Ivory out again and paint these on than it would have been to paint these bows when I initially had the Ivory out and then paint the pink around them. The fact that they are moulded in does make it a bit easier to paint them. Did you know that most belts have a buckle? They do. I painted these with scale 75 black metal. I couldn't really see any belt buckles moulded into the figures, either small regular ones or big fancy ones, so I just applied a spot of this colour on various figures in the belt buckle region. The biker got a couple of extra bits to represent a strangely shiny zipper and a button, and the cop got, I guess, a badge on the front of his hat. At some point I also added a few dark blue spots on his shirt to represent buttons, but it's barely noticeable. I painted the gun on Shooty Sooty Zombie with this colour as well. Why he's got a gun I have no idea, and I'm not sure he's even actually able to use it. He's still got it though, so it needs to be painted. It made sense to use this colour on handcuffs too. It's obvious how these are painted. The metal colour goes on the metal parts. I just want to take a second to say how much I like this little detail. I think it really adds a lot of interest. As does the IV Zombie's IV pole, or whatever you would call this thing. I figured once again I'd use the black metal, because I just like the black metal really. I feel like that colour works pretty well, but it's a fairly large object, so I thought doing a rough overcoat with Model Air Silver would add some interest to it. I apply this to a lot of the edges and upper surfaces. It's probably not super realistic, but it is also being held by a zombie. I painted the body of the little monitor thing with model colour Dark Sand, which is pretty much a colour I picked at random. I'm being careful not to also paint the pole this colour, because the thing seems to be sitting on a tray, which I've left metallic. I painted the screen with Vallejo Model Air Dark Sea Grey. I figure this screen has either been unplugged or had its battery drained, so the screen is dark. I used the same colour to paint the wheels on the IV trolley thing. You can see I'm avoiding the little metal frame part that goes down the side of the wheels. These wheels are small, but if you take your time and use an appropriately sized brush, it's not too difficult to get a nice result, and you can always use a dark wash to hide any rough edges. I figured the suit zombie's gun would have a different coloured grip, if only just to add some interest, so I painted that with model colour Chocolate Brown. Obviously I don't want to paint the fingers, but if I do, we can probably just hide that with some blood. A zombie might not be able to fire the weapon, but he sure could use it as a club. This zombie has what appears to be a stick. Is it a stick? I've no idea, but I painted it that way anyway, with Chocolate Brown. Back to IV Zombo. I paint the little circle knob detail on his monitor with model colour Vermillion. I don't know what this big red button does, but it certainly is there. I also added a splotch to one of these bags. It is meant to look like some sort of logo, but it does look more like a random splotch of red. Maybe that is the logo. Anyway, the logo on this Zombo's shirt looks like a couple of spots of red, and that's because it is. But from a distance it looks like it could be something more. It isn't, but it could be. The logo on this zombie's sneakers is a little red dash. Obviously not a famous logo of any kind of shoe brand, but I really didn't think it was worth the effort to paint an actual shoe brand's logo. I got the model colour light yellow out and did pretty much the same thing with it. A couple of spots on these sneakers, and I guess it's probably a name badge on this zombie's shirt. There's nothing moulded here to follow, but I painted a patch on the front of Backwards Hat Zombie's hat. I tried to make this as even as possible. Then this guy gets a spot on the back of his boot. It looks like something a boot might have. Next, I used model colour Dark Grey and add a patch to Purple Hat Man's hat. A lot of these things don't have anything moulded into the model to paint onto, so it's just freehand. Not that it's especially impressive freehand, but it's just some little bits that add a bit of life to these undead. I just thought it was kind of funny to paint a little X-Eyes dead face on the back of this bag. I'm easily amused. I used the same colour to paint, I'm assuming, a panel of buttons on the IV monitor thing. I tried to get these all neat and square looking, because I didn't want to have to hide everything with blood stains. I got the light yellow out again, and added a bit more detail to the purple hat. It's just a couple of dots, but it could very well be text that we can't decipher. Nope, it's just a couple of dots. Now it's time to add some washes. This video is already getting a bit too long, so I'll try to be brief with this, and it is pretty simple. I used Army Painter red tone on the red items of clothing, this is undiluted with the reds, and then for the pink dress, I dilute it with water, probably something like 3 parts water to 1 part red tone. Next, I apply green tone to the greens, again undiluted on the darker colours, and then thinned down for the light green on the green scrubs zombie. And then, get this, purple tone over the purple colours. There are 2 purpley colours and I used the same wash over both of them, which I think worked pretty well. I used blue tone for the blue colours, again undiluted on darker colours, and an appropriate level of dilution for the lighter colours. I used Army Painter military shader on some of the dark greens and drab colours. Not only is it good for shading the military, you can also use it on clothing. Then, dark tone. I used this on some of the darker blues. I just wanted them to be a bit darker, and dark tone will do that. I also thin it down and put it on the grey items of clothing. I dilute it even further for Shooty Sooty Zombie's suit. Also, this hat gets the same wash because it's the same colour as the suit. The final wash, at least as far as the clothing goes, is strong tone, which I've applied to the browns, unsurprisingly, increasing in dilution for the lighter colours, until I get to ivory. This obviously imparts a very dirty look. Though I will probably add a few dirty colours later, this is good for the time being. Now I dry brush some highlights. All I'm really doing here is reapplying the base colours over the washes I just applied, so I won't go too in depth here. You've seen the colours I applied, and I don't really feel like reading them all out again. The idea here is to bring most of the original colour back to the upper areas and raise details of the clothing. You could go a bit further and dry brush on some lighter highlights for more depth, but for figures this small and with so many different colours, I didn't really feel like spending the time. For the most part here, I'm using a pretty crappy little dry brush. It's just a cut down regular brush, and it does work, but it doesn't give anywhere near as nice a result as the makeup brush I used on the larger areas. Eventually, I dry brushed all of the zombies' clothing, and it's time to work on the hair now. I'm going to try and get through this really quickly as well. I divided the zombies into 5 groups, the first of which I painted with model colour chocolate brown. This zombie is the only one I really tried to do anything interesting with the hair. I gave her streaks of blonde, using scale 75 Sahara sand as a base. I used the same colour for the rest of the zombies I decided would be blonde. I gave some of them black hair, and like a maniac, I used model colour black for this. I chose 2 zombies to be gingers, which I based with model colour German orange. It's worth noting that I don't really know how to paint ginger hair. The 5th group was bald zombies, and I did kind of wish there was more of those. It would have sped things up a little. Next come some more washes, and this is pretty much the same as with the clothing, in that I'm using colours that somewhat match the base colours. Strong tone goes on the dark brown hair. The blondes get flesh wash, which I guess isn't really a blondie colour, but it does make things look a bit dirty and gross, which is what I want. You can't really wash black hair, so I didn't, and on the redheads, surprise surprise, I used red tone. I then dry brushed the hair, though I did this slightly different, kind of. I did use chocolate brown again for most of the brown-haired zombies, but I also used it on some of the black-haired ones. Most hair that looks black is actually very dark brown anyway, so this kind of made sense as a gentle highlight. Then, on the rest of the dark brown-haired zombies, I used model colour Cork Brown, just to give them a slightly lighter brown colour. The blondes get a dry brushing of the Sahara sand again, but I follow it with a dry brushing of model colour Dark Sand. The remaining black-haired zombies get highlighted with model colour Dark Grey. I do this fairly lightly because it's not intended as grey hair, though on the red dress lady I went a little bit heavier. She does kind of look like she might have some slight grey streaks. The gingers got model colour Orange Brown, which, surprisingly, for a model colour paint, was quite liquidy, so it didn't really dry brush very well, but it still worked, and I feel like it's turned out to be a fairly acceptable depiction of ginger hair. Not perfect, but good enough for my purposes. Now, we can finally start making them look a bit more zombie-like. I started by painting the wounds with Vallejo model colour red. I'm mainly applying this around the meaty parts of the wounds, which is the technical term. I'm also using a little bit of it for the bloodstains in other places, either ones I can see moulded into the figure, or just in places where I think blood would go, like on the clothes near the handcuffed forearm on this guy. I also paint the IV zombie's blood bag with this colour. Obviously the bag isn't full, so there's a bit of space at the top I'll have to figure out a colour for later on. It also made sense to paint the IV line with this, and as you can probably see, there's also blood on the bits at the bottom. Maybe it's being used as a weapon. Next, more blood. A slightly darker colour this time, model colour Burnt Cadmium Red. I'm doing pretty much the same thing here, just going a little bit lighter than the previous colour. It's just to add a bit of variety really. I also applied some streaks of blood coming from zombies' mouths and some of the wounds and run it down their clothes. This is most apparent on both of the medical zombies. Next, I painted the wires running from the monitor up the zombie's gown. I follow that with a rough highlight along the top of the wires, using model Air Blue with a tiny bit of model colour Sky Blue mixed in, probably around 2 parts blue and 1 part sky blue. The blood colour wasn't quite as dark as I wanted in some places, so I add some model colour Hull Red, and that should be nice and dark. I'm adding this to all the areas I did the 2 previous blood colours, though I am going a lot lighter with it. I don't want it to overpower the other colours. Now, get in the bone zone, because it's time for bone. I painted these with Vallejo model colour Off-White. I don't really know how bone looks while it's in an active zombie, but I feel like it's a safe assumption that it probably wouldn't be bleached white. I just couldn't see a colour in my collection that would have worked better, and washes can fix it later. There's quite a bit of exposed bone on these zombies, which I think is pretty cool, though it can be a bit fiddly to get to some of it, so maybe it's not a bad idea to use a small brush. There are also some figures with their teeth more exposed than others. I didn't feel like detailing their entire mouth or anything, but I did feel a speck of white here and there would be a good representation of teeth. Because these bones are going to be dirty anyway, they don't need a perfect coating. Also, I left some of the red colours on the bone in places. How realistic is that? I don't know. I've never seen a person, living or undead, with most of their arm eaten down to the bone. Have you? The wash I selected for the bones was Army Painter Soft Tone, and I think it worked pretty well. I am, of course, focusing this on the bones, but it is okay to get this on the meaty bits as well. When I was doing this, I was thinking about dog bones, the ones the dog has had for a while, where there are still bits of meat on the bone, but they've all gone brown and dried out. I also thought this was a good colour to wash the hospital Zombo's monitor. Now, it doesn't quite look so well looked after. Next, I pick out some of the facial details using Army Painter Dark Tone. I'm not really doing much beyond putting this in the eyes and mouths, which should give them a bit of depth, and that's effective enough for me. Trying to paint eyes this small is a lot of effort, and in my opinion, very rarely looks good. I paint things so that they look good at arm's length. These are, after all, gaming models, so the idea is that they'd be viewed on the gaming table. I'm sure somebody will say, "Oh, that's just lazy." And I suppose it is in a way, but you've got to think about where you're spending all your effort. This is better than spending hours trying to paint tiny eyes that shouldn't really be visible at arm's length anyway, with the likely result of goofy eyes that stand out like a sore thumb, versus a dark spot that, at a distance, your brain just fills in as, "That's where eyes go." Anyway, I also use this colour around the edges of clothing, wounds, and various accessories. It kind of acts as a shadow there, and makes the separation between the different colours look a little bit more convincing. I also use it to darken down the tyre treads on squished Zombo. And now, even more blood. This time, I'm using washes, and I had 2 of them to choose from. First, Secret Weapon Drying Blood. Would you believe that I'm applying this to the areas I've already put blood colours? Well, I am, and in addition to that, I'm streaking it down from wounds a bit and using it to kind of stain areas a bit further from the wounds. It works better than paint for this because, even undiluted, it's still a lot less opaque than the paint. I also tried to make some splatters. I didn't want big splatters because these aren't very big figures, so if the splatters were too big, it wouldn't look quite right. All I'm really doing here is loading the brush, putting the figure in front of it, and hitting it against the desk. It's not super effective, but it did give me a few nice specks of blood here and there. The other wash I had was Army Painter Red Tone, and it looks pretty much the same as the Secret Weapon wash does. I divided the zombies roughly in half and used one colour on either half, and I can't really tell the difference. And of course I did the splattering thing again. If you look here, you can actually see the difference in the washes, the one on the upper right being the Secret Weapon wash. The difference is very slight, and when they're on the models, it's almost impossible to tell them apart, especially when it's dry. In these shots, the figures on the left were done with Secret Weapon, and those on the right with the red tone. The main thing that makes the blood washes have a different look is the colours underneath them. None of this really matters, I just thought it might be fun to try both washes out. Looking at them, I thought these zombies aren't quite dirty enough, so I used Secret Weapon Sewer Water to give them some, I guess, sewer water effects. It might not be actual sewer water that these things have been traipsing through, but it is something gross and liquidy. I'm applying this to the lower areas of most of the zombies. Well, actually all of them, just some of them get it on their hands and such. I felt like this would be a good effect for the crawling zombies. Clearly they're going to encounter a little bit more of whatever this foul muck is, but everybody gets their fair share. There are probably a lot of little details I could do something with at this point, but I was running out of time. I felt like the IV bag needed something, so I painted the upper part of it with model colour light grey. Obviously, IV bags should be transparent, but it's really hard to paint a transparent effect with opaque models and paint, so this is what I went with. I give it a light wash with some fairly heavily diluted red tone, just to give it a kind of hint of blood. The zombies are now finished, or finished enough, so I apply matte varnish, and that's it. The Project Z zombies, both the male and female set, are finally painted, just in time for Halloween. Probably. I'm pretty happy with how most of these have turned out. Some of them are better than others for various reasons, and if there was more time, I would likely find a whole bunch of little things that either I missed or just didn't think about. Maybe some more fresh, glossy looking blood over the matte coat would look good. It is okay to make changes, even if you previously considered that model completed. This whole thing has kind of been a reminder of why I don't like working to deadlines. This one was certainly self-imposed, so it is my own fault, and if I wasn't super close to a finished, or finished enough, result, I would have said nuts to the whole Halloween thing, and just put the video out when it was ready, but this is how it worked out. Annoying deadlines aside, I did have a lot of fun painting these. I rather enjoy the variety of colours and all the different things you can do, as opposed to military figures, which are usually all wearing uniforms and look more or less the same. The downside being that so many different colours does make the whole process take significantly more time. There's a lot of interesting models here that have made the painting process more fun. Things like the decapitated head, torn off limbs handcuffed to zombies, and the entire IV pole, whatever that's called. There really is quite a lot of character in these zombies. Clearly I haven't removed the figures from the pins I mounted them on for painting, or made bases for them. I didn't have the time to find the bases that came with these kits, let alone actually model and paint the bases. If that upsets you, I suggest going and having a quiet sob over there in the corner. I will make bases for these at some point, because I think that's going to be fun, just not right now. Anyway, I think I might be waffling now, and I'm starting to lose my voice. If you're interested, there's a list of the paints I've used in the description below, assuming there's enough room. I did use quite a few colours here. If you've got any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comments section below. I hear it's pretty good for that. Subscribe if you want, support on Patreon or Ko-fi if you're able, and check out the links in the description. Take care of yourselves, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Brains.